Tales from the Parkland, the new edition from Velox Books, available June 7th, 2024. It's time for the Post-Mortem Report, with your hosts Ronald McGilvray and Michael Schotter. Each month, these sultans of speculative fiction take a break from bending reality to ask one burning question. What cool stuff got buried in the social media graveyard while people were busy yelling at each other? Well, there's only one way to find out, so let's dig into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Post-Mortem Report. I'm your co-host, Michael Schotter.
And I'm Ronald McGilvray. Welcome to episode 22.
Very nice.
Yeah, that's two twos.
2 for 2.
2 for 2.
Yeah. We're gonna have to probably get away from the number gimmicks at some point, but I got one planned for next episode already, so you're gonna get at least one more number bit. So look forward to that. But how have things been going for you lately?
Pretty good. Pretty good. But before we start, I would like to wish you a happy birthday.
Oh,
that's right,
you.
people. It's Michael's birthday today. I won't say how old he is, but if everyone thinks really hard, you may find out because I sent Michael a little gift. Did you get my gift, Mike? Did you?
Yes.
Why don't you show our fine fans what I got you?
Do I have to?
Come on. It's fun.
All right.
There we go.
Mistakes were made.
It's a wonderful 50th birthday for Michael Schotter. Doesn't look a day over 20. Outstanding. What a way to start the show. Big 5-0.
Good times. Good times.
There you go. So happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hope you have a great day. I mean, how could it not be? Get to spend time with me.
I know, right? It's like I got my present early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess actually, show related, I should mention for people who are constantly dissecting my office, you may notice a change.
Ooh.
In the background where there used to be the shelf sort of more in the middle, framed by those two pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Now the two pictures are together and the shelves are over there. You probably say, who cares? But there's a story behind it because Michael and I were having a meeting last week, and in the middle of it, all my shelves collapsed. Well, actually, the top one, just on the right-hand side, just gave way, smashed, and I watched it come down, hit the second shelf, and they all exploded and crashed down on my table, sending all my little trinkets all over the place.
It was not ideal. It was actually a little scary.
Yeah, it was so loud. I didn't know what the hell was happening. But, my wife, like the Martha Stewart that she is, actually rebuilt the whole thing for me.
Oh, that was nice.
Yeah. So now it's up. I was going to touch it, make sure it's sturdy, but I was too chicken to after that last.
Don't play with fire. That's not a good idea.
Yeah, those shelves were actually heavier than I thought because they really came down with a whoop. Even like Martha came running upstairs, going, "What's happening? Are you okay?" She must have thought I had a heart to killed over or something.
The panic was real. I saw the panic in her eyes.
It's she came scurrying upstairs pretty quick. So
yeah,
I was like, because it was loud.
Well, thankfully too, your laptop didn't get decimated because I know it was pretty close to coming down on top of it. So
I know. Well, that's the thing. If we hadn't been having that meeting, my MacBook would have been closed and pushed back underneath it. But I had it forward and open, so when it came, it fell behind it. So how's that for Flukorama?
Timing is everything.
Yeah, yeah. So
Well,
there's a little bit exciting.
congratulations on your unexpected but beauteous office update.
Yeah, hopefully it'll last as long as they stood the last time. That'll
Yeah,
be good.
yeah, that would be ideal.
Oh, what else? Well, you
I know
probably
you've got
know,
some
but
other big things going on lately.
yeah, but I'm not ready to share those yet. I want to get into the smaller things first,
Oh,
like my
okay.
failures. So I
Oh,
started
okay.
to jog. Well, I told you, I mean, you knew because I've been trying to exercise because we've had unusually nice weather up here in Canada where barely any snow since like early February. And so I thought I'm going to get out instead of exercising in my basement. I'm going to go for a jog. And when I went out, I wasn't going to go crazy. I was going to do sort of a jog, then walk, then jog just to start off, get those winter, muscles eased in. And it seemed actually pretty good until the next day when I woke up and all my legs were like super sore and everything was sore. And I thought, I'm just not doing this anymore. So I said I was going to be jogging. I am no longer jogging, but I am going out. So I'm going for like sort of fast walks now. So getting out, trying to get anywhere from at least minimum 2K, but I try something to get up to 5 kilometers in. So I'm getting listening to podcasts, going out, getting my thing. So my jogging story, which was all geared to go, big fail.
Yeah.
What else exciting? Um, oh, my son went to Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
He went to Las Vegas, didn't come back a pauper, so that was good. I was worried
Excellent.
he's going to spend all his money, and I wasn't even going to mention it, except he went there and he got me this Las Vegas shirt.
Ah,
Las
Viva.
Vegas. So
Yeah.
there you go. Fabulous Las Vegas. So he
Yeah,
went to
very
Las
nice.
Vegas and he brought me back a shirt. So
It's always
that was
nice
fun.
when people travel and bring you things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Um, all right. Well, get on to some bigger news. Uh, Today, actually, March 15th, is the 1 year anniversary of the release of Cutter's Deep.
Woohoo.
So by the time you see by the time you see this, it'll be well past that. But it is 1 year today when we're shooting that. So it's been I couldn't believe how fast time just flew by. And
Yeah.
it's been kind of weird because actually the sales have been picking up quite a bit for Cutters lately. It sort of comes in fits and valleys and peaks.
Mhm.
But been having a good run lately on Cutters Deep. But 1 year anniversary. So hey, same day as your birthday.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say also, ironically, this is my anniversary date. In addition to being my birthday, it is my anniversary date for becoming an author because it was this date 7 years ago when I committed to writing and publishing my first book. So, yeah, all
Wow.
sorts of crazy stuff
Did you
going
do
on.
that on purpose? You wanted to do it on your birthday?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Okay.
I had kind of been working on the manuscript for a few weeks
Yeah.
leading up to that, and I had kind of decided that if I felt like I had gotten to a point where it was something I actually wanted to go through with and do, I was going to make the decision on my birthday. And it just so happened that a couple weeks into that project, I was like, okay, am I doing this or not? And I was like, well, let's tie it to the birthday. And I got to the point I read back what I had written, and I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And
Wow.
the rest is history, as they say.
Wow. So 15th is a huge day. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, this
So,
will be the start of my 8th year as an author,
wow.
starting
A veteran.
tomorrow, basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's that. There's beginning of your writing career. There's the 1 year anniversary for Cutters Deep.
Mhm.
Oh, I finally finished the first draft of my new book.
Excellent.
So it's done. I I was waffling back and forth on sort of the ending, and then I made a decision. I manned up, made a decision, cranked it out, and it's done. Of course, now I got to go do the read through and then start to do my first revision. Make
Mhm.
sure, because I already saw some things where I put it in. I was like, hmm, wonder what I was thinking there. So I've been sort of making a few changes. So hopefully that comes along. I'll give you a sneak peek.
Yes, I'm very, very eagerly anticipating a chance to experience more of that because, as I mentioned a few episodes ago, I actually got a chance to read one of the initial drafts of the first few chapters of that a while ago. So I have a little bit of inside knowledge as to what's going on with that particular tale. And I'm very curious to see how things end up shaking out with that one. So,
Just like Cutters is just when I was writing, it just took on a mind of its own. I just like, where did that come from? So
mhm,
it's I liked it. I think each project that I do, my writing gets better. I find what works best, sort of for me. So
mhm.
so yeah, so that's a load off because that was something, and I really, really, really wanted to keep it around 82. Oh, I got a prop.
Ooh,
Well, I mean, everyone's probably seen it if they were doing it, but I have my
nice.
manuscript there. So I knew I
Yeah.
want to be around 80,000 and it comes in at 82 right now. So that, which is actually strange that it would be an even number. Because when I was doing
Hmm.
my work in progress stuff, it was always, 469, 60,283 or something. But this one I looked at it and I was like, 82,000? That looks almost fake. But it's not. That's exactly what it ended up at.
Yeah, nice.
So yeah, I think I don't know. We'll go through the revisions, but it's like the point where I let you know like yourself or my wife or a couple of beta readers that I have that like to read my stuff. That's the worst part. That's worse than publishing because you just sit there and go, oh, what happens if they comes back and just goes, I don't know, Ron. This is like you took a left turn here. Like your other stuff was good, but this one, I don't know. So you just sit
Yeah.
there and the waiting, 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 waiting. What are they thinking? Why aren't they responding to me? Oh, they
Oh
hate
yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, when stuff is with the beta readers, that's a tough moment for sure. It's a tough
Yeah,
time period to get through because no matter how you feel about it personally, you just don't know what people's reactions to a thing
yeah,
are going to be until you get them. Right? You might have an
exactly.
idea, right? Like you might have an inclination, but there's nothing quite like getting that verified or denied
Yeah.
to really put you on the roller coaster.
And the problem too is when you have a body of work, like you have other books out, stuff,
Hmm.
people are able to compare now. If
Right.
they really liked one and they're expecting a specific thing or style or
Right.
it's just like,
Yep.
oh well, that's just part of the creative process.
Indeed. Indeed. It's just
Yeah,
part of that whole chaos that is this profession. Yeah.
exactly. Well, my last piece of news
Uh-huh.
is my short story collection, Tales from the Parkland, has been picked up by Velox Books. So they're going to be
Congratulations.
publishing it under their banner. And I think the estimated time is June, early June for it to come
Hmm.
out. So
Hmm.
it's kind of exciting. Hopefully, there'll be some new eyes. We'll find it. We shall
Hmm.
see. We
Yeah.
shall see.
Yeah. It's very cool that we'll basically get a new release.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's a time when people are really apt to catch on to things, right? Whenever they see that pop up in the new releases, you're going to get access to a lot of people who may not have seen that since it was a new release previously. So
Yeah.
very cool.
And it was my very first published work, like the first thing I ever put out. So,
Hmm.
back then, not that I'm anybody now, but back then I was like literally
Yeah,
nobody.
yeah.
I hadn't even really had uh, social media presence.
Hmm.
I just I remember when I was working on it, it was my son was like, "You really should get on social media," and I was like, "Well, I'm on MySpace," and he said, I don't think that's a thing anymore." I said, "But I hadn't been on that since the early my shock lines days." But
Hmm.
so yeah, so it's been quite a journey since
Yeah.
then. So yeah, I'd like to thank Velox Books for taking a chance on me. Hopefully, it's a worthwhile project for both of us.
Hmm.
And keep an eye out for that book. They'll be doing posts and stuff on it, and I'll be posting so you can keep an eye on the progress. And hopefully, in June, it'll be out there, and you can visit the Parkland for yourself.
Excellent.
There
Excellent.
you go. That that pretty well wraps up all the exciting things in my neck of the woods. What about you? What do you have to say other than that it's your birthday? Why don't you put the
Yeah, yeah.
glasses on again?
Yeah, you're tempting me to do my bit of this segment with the glasses on, but I'm gonna refrain. I'm gonna
Okay.
refrain. I feel like I don't want to overdo that bit. But I did want to talk for a minute at least about my next major project, my next major release, which is actually sitting next to me on the screen here. So those of you who are fans of my first seven books will be excited to know that I actually have an eighth book on the horizon, which unsurprisingly, perhaps, is called Eight. And those of you who are familiar with some of my books that feature titles that are numbers might be somewhat excited by that. But as the subtitle of this indicates, it is a short story collection that contains a bunch of tales that focus on many of the known and some previously unknown big men from the Nodwell's timelines. And of course, those of you who are already familiar with any of my books will be pretty excited and interested in that, I think. But even those of you who are not necessarily familiar with them might actually find this to be a cool, interesting starting point for getting into my stuff. And that was actually kind of one of the goals of this book was to make it sort of palatable and interesting and fun for people who are already familiar with the Nodwell's timelines, but also a possible point of entry for new readers as well. The whole idea behind this release is that each of the stories, while they all support each other and kind of collectively tell a bit of a cumulative narrative, they also are standalone stories. And I'm kind of taking advantage of that with the way I'm going to be doing the release of this book. So basically, throughout the rest of 2024, I'm going to be releasing four of the stories from this book as individual singles. And actually, spoiler, the first of those four, Paper or Plastic, is actually available today as of the release of this episode of the Postmortem Report. So when you're done watching us talk about all the stuff that we're talking about, you can hop on over to Amazon and check that out if you're so inclined. And basically, the way this is going to work is that 3 additional stories will come out over the next 6 months or so. So basically in July, September, and November, the additional stories that I'm releasing as these singles will be released. The other thing that's kind of interesting about this from a pricing standpoint is I really wanted to price this in a way where if people did want to get on board early and do a pre-order and pick up the singles and all that sort of thing, I still wanted it to be kind of viable for them. So the singles are going to be priced at 99 cents and the book itself will be half price during the pre-order period. So if you did want to jump on it early, you can actually end up still paying less for the whole thing than the book is going to cost when it comes out. So no harm in jumping in early, I guess, is the takeaway there. This is another one of those kind of experimental things that I'm doing where I kind of wanted to try to build a little more hype around this book and get people a little more excited about it in advance of it actually being released. So the book itself will not be coming out until January for the paperback and hardcover, or February of 2025 for the ebook. But as I said, the singles will be released throughout 2024 leading up to it. So I'm kind of following that form or that concept of like an album release from the music world. And we'll see how that works. But yeah, there you have it. So now it's time for our featured post, which this time we have one from Joe Scipione about 2 of his recent books that are actually part of an interesting series, which isn't a series. And I can relate to this one because this is kind of how my books work, in that he's got these couple of books here, Decay and Justice, which can actually be read in any order, despite being part of a series of books called the Contact series. So wanted to throw that out there. Thought that might be a cool one for people to check out.
Should be reading Joe, since we're mentioning it, just because I like to brag.
Uh-huh.
The Life and Times of Edward Morgan.
Yeah, very nice.
By Joe.
You got that
Not
from him at StokerCon, didn't you?
Yes, I did. And look, see? I can't see because I'm behind it, but it's dressed to me and it's signed.
Very nice. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Ooh,
Piquing
very own copy.
Piquing everyone's jealousy as
there
usual.
You go. So
good times. Having said all of that, let's get into some book talk.
Book talk.
So, my goal for this episode was to take another trip down the sci-fi rabbit hole. Because as I've mentioned on the show a few times recently, I feel like I've kind of been neglecting the science fiction side of the house a little bit. And I've been trying to kind of correct that. This was a book that had been on my to-be-read pile for quite some time that I finally got around to recently and was quite impressed by, which is Embers of War by Gareth Powell. So for those of you who aren't aware, Embers of War is actually a trilogy of books that are in the space opera science fiction subgenre. So space battles, a lot of interplanetary stuff, a lot of aliens, a lot of futuristic sci-fi motifs present in this book. But one of the things that I also wanted to mention about it that I think might be interesting for those of you who are into some of the other speculative genres, such as horror, is the fact that there are actually some pretty strong horror elements to this book as well, where it kind of goes to some pretty crazy places, which I won't spoil, that might be an interesting hook for somebody who typically reads genres such as horror, but is also kind of interested in dabbling in sci-fi. So definitely wanted to mention that aspect of it. And another really cool component of this book is the fact that I think it works equally well for somebody who's like a veteran of the science fiction genre and is really familiar with the ins and outs of things like space opera, and is maybe looking for something that's a little bit of a modern, kind of fresh take on some of those classic ideas. And I also think the book works really well potentially as an introduction to the science fiction and space opera subgenres, such that, even if you've never really read any science fiction and are just kind of interested in dabbling with it, or experimenting with the genre, I think this would actually be a really good starting point. And I think that's a particularly challenging thing to do, right? To write something that's effective and equally capable of appealing to both a seasoned expert reader of the genre or a newcomer. And I think that's kind of one of the standout qualities of this book that I think is really noteworthy.
Hmm.
But to give you a little bit of a taste of what the book is about, sort of beyond the general premise of it being space opera, basically tells the story of a sentient spaceship called the Trouble Dog that ends up participating in a genocidal war crime, and as a result decides to abandon its career in the military and go off and join an organization that's dedicated to pursuing peace and helping others. It's basically this organization called the House of Reclamation that spends its time going around the galaxy, rescuing ships that are in distress, helping people that are in need of help, and doesn't really align itself with any sort of political entity or species or anything like that. It's basically like a free agent in this version of the galaxy. And it's a really cool concept, the way that it's done in this book. And I think people who enjoy the tropes and the sort of traditions of space opera will really enjoy the way this book kind of plays with and tinkers with a lot of the expectations that you might have about how a story like that might unfold. But of course, I don't want to delve too deeply into those wrinkles because that would kind of be spoilery. But needless to say, I really enjoyed the book. I would highly recommend it. It's definitely like a really strong, really easy to recommend sci-fi read that I thoroughly enjoyed.
I have a question.
Yes.
Um, so is you were saying, it's good for someone who's just getting into science fiction and stuff. Now, is that mean, is there like a heavy use of jargon, science
Not a
jargon?
ton.
Okay.
Yeah, not a ton of jargon, just enough that you're gonna, if you enjoy a bit of hard science in your science fiction, there's going to be a few little things there for you to latch on to, but they never take center stage, right? They're more accents or accoutrements to the
Yeah.
storytelling as opposed to like the core focus of it. So I wouldn't really categorize this as hard science fiction. That's why I feel like the space opera moniker or subgenre is the appropriate place to categorize something like this, because while there are some science and hard science elements to it, they're definitely not the focus.
Hmm. So I just want to be clear. You're saying it's a sentient ship. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes,
Okay. So
yes.
did he like jettison its crew off and then go on its own, or you can't talk about that?
Well, I mean, I definitely could talk about it. So the idea in this version of reality, right, in this universe that's established in these books,
Uh-huh.
is that these ships were created using a combination of human and animal genetics, right? So the Trouble Dog is actually a member of a class of ships called the Carnivore class. And basically, the intelligences that drive these ships are a combination of human and wolf uh, DNA and
Yeah.
intellect, right? So they have like the mind and sort of intellectual capacity of a human hybridized with a wolf. And that's how they uh, perform the operations that they do at the speed they do and with the instincts that they have and basically all of the things that go into making them function at the level that they do are because of this like hybrid genetic combination that's been created. And so that's kind of a neat thing about it, right? Because these carnivore class ships are sort of some of the most badass, flying around in this universe, right? They're kind
Right.
of legendary things that or there weren't that many of them made, and they played a very like pivotal, important part in this recent war that's occurred in the where the story starts.
Okay.
And so they're like these well-known, like revered things. And so for one of them to basically resign its commission, go off on its own and join this House of Reclamation to try to make amends for the crimes it committed during wartime
Huh.
is kind of a big deal, right? And so that's
Right.
like a major crux of the story.
Hmm. That does sound interesting. So let me rephrase the question then. So is it completely sentient where it just runs itself, or does it sometimes have a crew?
Yeah, so for example, right, like under normal circumstances, this ship would have, say, between 150 and 300 people on it. But most
Okay.
of those people would be soldiers, right, that it's
Right.
transporting to battlegrounds and stuff like that. But in the case of this story, where it's operating after being decommissioned, its crew is like 5 people, right? And so
Uh-huh.
you have like a captain, a medical officer, a couple of rescue technicians, a security person, and a mechanic. And
Yeah.
actually, the mechanic who's responsible for kind of keeping the ship running and doing the maintenance is one of the more interesting characters, which I won't delve into too much, except to mention that it is an alien race, which is not human. And that's kind
Okay.
of a cool facet of things, right? Because one of the cool things about science fiction is that you get to explore the concept of races that aren't necessarily human like, either in their biology or the way they think or approach things. And that's done
Yeah.
really well in this book. So you have this character, Nod, who's a member of this race called the Druff. And basically, they're these six-legged creatures where each of their appendages can act as a hand, a foot, or a face. And so that makes them very well suited to interacting in an environment where they're doing maintenance on a ship, right? Because they can use their various appendages at whatever way is most convenient in any given moment, right? So they might
Yeah.
be like using 4 of their extremities to like secure themselves in place, and then another 2 to actually work on something, and then like lift a leg up and expose their sensory organs to have a conversation with somebody. But like the face you're talking to might be on one arm one moment and another arm the next. So it
Huh.
creates these like really interesting dynamics, right? Where it's like you're having this interaction with a being that's not at all human like.
Uh,
And so those are some of I find the most interesting things about sci-fi is how it really allows you to explore things that are so outside the norm of typical human interactions.
right. Is this a big, thick book? Is it a normal size
Uh,
book?
it's it's A medium-sized book. It's definitely not a chunker.
Okay.
I'd say it's probably around 300 or 400 pages, but it
Okay.
flies by. It's a very quick read. Now, that being said, it is the first of three books that make up this Embers of War trilogy,
Okay.
but I would highly recommend checking it out, even if you were to read it as a standalone. Where the story ends, you could consider that like a stopping point, but you'll almost certainly want to continue with it from where it ends, right? Because there's a lot of stuff left unanswered that is clearly going to be addressed in the subsequent books.
Okay. The other two aren't out yet.
No, they're out. They've been
Oh,
done
okay.
for a while now because this book actually came out, I believe, in 2018, and then the subsequent books came out the following years. So it's done. It's
Yeah.
ready to rock,
Huh.
and has actually won a few awards in the science fiction community, which is kind of one of the things that put it on my radar. So it's you know, of like the modern science fiction trilogies or series that are out there, it's right up there with things like the Murderbot Diaries that I've mentioned previously, and other things that are in that sort of pantheon of modern science fiction.
Hmm. Sounds interesting. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, I think you would enjoy this one for sure. And I think that, like I say, the little horror elements that kind of creep up from time to time in it, I think might tickle your fancy too, because it gets a little intense and a little dark in spots in a way that I was almost a little surprised by. Um, but in a way that I also appreciated, and where I didn't feel like it was forced or like shoehorned in there. It felt very like authentic and legitimate the way he integrated those elements. So
It's funny. I don't actually read as much. I used to read more science fiction when I was younger, and I watched lots of science fiction like shows and movies,
mhm.
but I don't find that I read as much anymore. I don't know why. I guess maybe because the movies with CGI and stuff, they can do such a good job now
Mhm.
with it. Where in
I
the
find that I've
days,
become very selective and very picky about my science fiction reading these days, which I think is one of the reasons why I've kind of backburnered a lot of modern science fiction in recent years. Not to mention the fact that I've just been so busy writing my own.
yeah,
Is that kind of puts you into a weird space too, right? Where it's like, you know, sci-fi isn't necessarily the genre I want to read while I'm writing it. Right? It's kind of nice to read outside your genre that you're actually actively working in, I think sometimes.
right.
Um, but having said that, I do really enjoy and really crave like a good science fiction story. And I think this, like I say, is one of the better ones that I've read in a while that really was like a standout for me. So definitely one of the reasons I wanted to mention it here. So what have you been reading?
Well, I went back in time and I reread a book actually, which I haven't done in a while,
Nice.
to the very first horror book that I ever read, and it's called The Rats by James Herbert.
Very
And
nice.
surprisingly, considering how old it is and that I'd already read it before, it still stands up after all this time. As a matter of fact, it creeped me out.
Nice.
It was like I'm sure most people know what it's about, but it's in London and these rats emerge. And you've got sort of bigger rats that are kind of abnormally big, but you also have normal rats. And I mean, when if you've ever seen those YouTube videos where someone kicks a garbage bag in New York City and you see how many of them scurry out,
Hmm.
apparently there's lots of them. So when there's one, there's lots. And it starts off innocuously enough, just with a small little attacks, but it just kind of steamrolls. And I don't know why it got under my skin. Just the thought, like I'd hear noises at night when I was in bed, like the air vents crinkling from like the heat or the cold, and I'd be like, "Is that a rat? Is that a rat? Is that something crawling up?" And it really does. I guess because probably in our mind as some primordial thing, it's like, don't let rats bite you. They're full of disease or something.
Mhm.
So in the back of your
It doesn't seem
mind,
like it would be a fun time.
no. And it was just, and it's a simple enough story, but I think it has something that triggers that, like people don't like rats. If you think you've got like a mouse or a rat in your house, right away it's like call somebody or set traps. There's no, oh, let's pick them up and get them, bring them outside. Live,
Yeah, no
little
live and let
rat.
live happening here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like get it out of my house. There's like that hatred. But of course they chew everything and wreck everything. But these ones do that, but they also eat you. So it makes it even worse. So as I was mentioning, I mean the story's simple enough. In London, everything's kind of going along normal. And then there's these like odd attacks here and there, but they seem to be like either multiplying or organizing because these attacks start happening more frequently and in like set places. Like there's this one scene that was in a subway, and I'm just thinking like, where do you even go? You're already underground. Where these things, this is where they live. They're underground. They use that underground to move around. So it's like, what are you going to run down one of the rails? Who knows what's waiting for you in the darkness? So that whole scene was really creepy. But they come out on like all sorts of places. But there's one, of course, main character who's trying to investigate and find why it's happening, where they come from, how to exterminate them. And yeah, I don't know. It's still really creepy. I was,
Yeah,
I
nice.
was, I was pleasantly
It's cool that
surprised.
it holds up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you're reading it, yeah. You know what? I can't even say it was really dated. I'm trying to think of like the passages and stuff. And maybe some of the verbiage or dialogue.
I was gonna say dialogue is usually one of the biggest giveaways, I think, for
You,
like stuff from that era. Yeah.
yeah, you might know that it's a bit older. But yeah, it really holds up, and I'm surprised. Well, I guess there was like movies like Willard and stuff, which is
Yeah.
also creepy and gross. Well,
Yeah.
furry rats squirming all over you. But
Especially
yeah,
that Crispin Glover version. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I was, as I said, pleasantly surprised. If you want something that's just kind of get under your skin, The Rats by James Herbert will do it. It was funny lying there in bed actually thinking about it. And I knew it was silly,
Yeah.
but while I was reading it, every sound I heard, that's the first thing my mind triggered was like a rat's. What is that noise? It's not just settling pipes or anything anymore that I'm used
Right.
to. It was just the rats. But yeah, it's just some of the scenes. You can easily put yourself in them because when you're reading it, you're like, here I am sitting on a subway, and then someone starts screaming, and you're like, what is that? And you look, and then these things just come screaming out. Now, of course, it does help that I've seen those creepy videos of, you know, people when they see rats and stuff
Hmm.
coming out of under garbage bags, or they throw a rock at something and also they all come scattering out to go run away. But
Hmm.
it's yeah, yeah. I'm surprised there's not, like I said, more movies or stuff because that it just seemed, I don't know, because there's so many of them. Well, I guess with CGI they could do it. easy enough.
Mhm.
But I mean,
Well, that's the thing about that original Willard movie, right? Was like how they had to actually have like rat wranglers and all that
yeah,
stuff to make that happen, right? And I remember saw an interview with Ernest Borgnine once where he was talking about how they actually had to put peanut butter on him so the rats would crawl all over him and stuff for his death
yeah,
scene. And he was not thrilled about that.
I guess not. Yeah, because even normal rats are a good handful. Like they're not like
Mhm.
puny little things.
Oh yeah. Oh, and some of those big chunky river rats, they get like, sizable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's yeah. Surprising. I mean, I thought I'd enjoy it for nostalgia, but it did it did creep me out. Rats apparently are creepy.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Who knew?
yeah, yeah. So
Good
yeah, if you're
time.
looking for something to creep you out, check out The Rats by James Herbert. Mm-mm-mm.
There you go.
What's that behind you, Michael?
Ah. So you also watched a movie recently, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I watched Thanksgiving. Yeah, it's
So
well,
I
it was
have to ask,
yeah.
what possessed you out of all the movies that you have and could have selected to select this one?
Well, I guess one of the main ones is on one of my streaming services. It just came out,
Yeah, nice.
so it attracted my attention because I go through new releases on Fridays, and I was looking at it. And plus, I always knew about the movie in my head because it was actually the trailer that Eli Roth did for the Grindhouse movies that
Hmm.
Rodriguez did with I guess with
Tarantino.
Tarantino. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so it was like I forget what the tagline is. So they had the turkey and
This
just
Thanksgiving,
Thanksgiving.
it's Thanksgiving.
It's murder or some. Anyways, or you're being served or something like that.
Yeah,
So
nice.
when it came out, I think the first time when I saw that it arrived, I went to check to say, "Wait, could this be that?" And then I found out that it was actually done by Eli Roth.
Ah,
So I was like, what the heck? I'm gonna do it. And I thought it would be a good subject to talk about on the show. So I watched it specifically for the postmortem report. So
nice.
it was uh they guess is like a Best Buy. A picture like a store like a Best Buy. And the
Hmm.
whole sort of premise starts there where it's Thanksgiving in like Plymouth, Massachusetts. And
Okay.
um there's I guess some citywide festival they have, and they all have these masks they give out for free that you can wear, like some, I guess, the founder of their town. And they have a big parade, and I guess people dress up in like pilgrim outfits and stuff like that. And when everything's closed, there's this man and woman, no, husband and wife, that own this big superstore. And they decide they're going to open it up on Thanksgiving and do a big Thanksgiving blowout. So I guess they figured, well, there's always like Black Friday and Boxing Day stuff, but we're gonna shake it up and do this Thanksgiving. So they do that, and apparently the town that they live in, they're like either really poor or they're like crazy lunatics because they're just out front hours before the store opens, and they're all, let us in, let us in, and they're giving away, I think, like a waffle maker, if I remember correctly. If the
Nice.
first 100 people get a waffle maker, and they all were wigging out that they were not going to get their waffle maker. And I was just like, okay. And then finally, all hell breaks loose before they can open the door, and they stampede towards the door. People get trampled and stuff. And then they bust through the door and go rampaging through the place. They're like punching each other out to grab the waffle maker and to find other bargain gifts. And people are like run down, squished. There's one kill scene where like uh the whole like a head top of the head comes off, but it gets stuck in the wheels of a cart, one of those shopping carts. It's anyways, there's lots of carnage
Yeah.
at this thing, and then afterwards, it's like the town goes back to normal. I mean, there's some kind of I don't know, bad blood towards the owners of the place or whatever, but these people who you saw acting crazy just go back to their jobs and act as if like nothing happened, even though they ran over somebody with their cart, or smashed them over the head with some TV or something.
So
It's
sort of like
just
Black Friday meets The Purge.
yeah,
Yeah.
basically. But then, I mean, it doesn't take much to imagine that two and two together, that somebody is seeking revenge for that, because the
Hmm.
murders start happening after that. And it's this person that's dressed, and they have the mask on that they're giving out, because lots of people are wearing these masks. So it's easy to blend in with
Hmm.
everyone. So this person has the mask, and they have the sort of the pilgrim tall hat on and outfit, and lots of carnage and mayhem ensues while this person seeks revenge for whatever slight he feels he was done. And
For
of
not
course, I
getting his
can't
waffle maker.
exactly, I can't
Yeah.
give away what the reasoning was, but the killings just keep on coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have of course your characters that are sort of being hunted as well, because the family that actually owns a store, they're going to be targeted, because it was their fault for opening
Yeah, they're like the
the stuff.
catalyst of everything. Yeah.
And there was one. Well, I won't say what it was, but there's one death in particular that the type of death it was made my skin crawl.
Yeah.
Actually, it did something else, but I can't really say it on a nice family oriented podcast such as ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I was just like, it was just, I've seen it before, and I don't know, that to me is like literally the worst. The worst possible way to go in my mind.
Hmm.
And it's there was another movie that did it, and that scene always kind of stuck with me too. But they did
Hmm.
on this one, and I knew it as soon as it started happening. I was like, "Oh, you're not going to do that. You're not going there, are you?" And I was like,
Yeah.
that's a little something. For some reason, it really triggers me. It doesn't stop
Yeah.
me from watching it, but it
Nice.
is
Face
just
your fears.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. But it is there. But anyways, it went by really fast. It was well paced. I mean, it's not an Oscar contender or anything, but it was fun. And if you like your sort of slasher horror, it's
Hmm.
uh, it's a fun one, especially since it's kind of based on a fun kind of cheeky trailer that
Hmm.
was done. That's three of them now. There was it Oboe with a Shotgun. There was
Hmm.
another one. This is the third one, but I can't think what the other one was. But so yeah, any of you horror aficionados, Thanksgiving, I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, sounds like it would be a winner. Sounds like it would check all the right boxes for somebody who was into that or looking to go down that sort of rabbit hole for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Because you never know, with some of these, you're just kind of like, The acting could be cheesy or just the kills could
Sure.
be, but the whole thing was overall pretty good.
Nice.
Check out Thanksgiving, Eli Roth.
All right. So I am going to talk about a video game this time. And that video game, maybe unsurprisingly to those of you who follow video games, because it's become extremely popular in recent months, is Helldivers 2. And I think the sort of speculative fiction tie-in for this game that kind of like really, I think, brings it directly in line with the sorts of things that people who watch our show might be interested in is how obviously and heavily influenced this game is by Starship Troopers. So if you're familiar with that Heinlein book, or if you're familiar with the now classic film from the 90s, Starship Troopers, and have always kind of wanted to play out that experience of going to alien worlds and fighting giant bug monsters with massive amounts of firepower, this game might scratch that itch for you. And as the name implies, this is actually a sequel to the original game Helldivers, which came out a while ago. But one of the biggest fundamental differences about this game is that it's actually done as a third-person shooter as opposed to a top-down sort of twin stick shooter like the original was. And that is actually one of the things that I'm most excited about regarding it, because as much as I enjoyed the first game and thought it was really cool, I'm not really a super huge fan of the top-down perspective for action games, especially because it just makes everything super tiny and difficult to see. So having the camera in third person, kind of right over the shoulder and behind your character, and everything being kind of all close and in your face, just makes the gameplay experience a lot more fun and palatable for me. But of course, those of you who are super into video games are probably already well familiar and acquainted with this game. But let me just say that if you're a science fiction fan, if you enjoy third person action games, if you enjoy games with sort of novel game mechanics and little hooks to them, and especially if you enjoy playing games cooperatively, there's a lot to be said for Helldivers 2. Not the least of which being is it's one of the very few cooperative focused games that I've seen that actually has friendly fire on by default. And that's a very intentional design decision on the developer's part, because one of the big things about this game is you will die. And sometimes that will be because your fellow players are just spraying bullets around, trying to kill all these bug alien things that are attacking you. And you might end up in the wrong place at the wrong time and eat a couple rounds. Or a orbital strike or some napalm strafing run or something like that that your teammates have triggered. And that definitely makes for some of the most like hilarious, spontaneous moments that happen during the gameplay. But you might be wondering to yourself, how does that work from a gameplay perspective if you're dying all of the time? And the basic idea is that you are actually always playing as a clone of yourself, or of a soldier. And so when your sort of scrub soldier dies, you're immediately replaced by another clone that gets pulled out of cryo and stuck into one of these hell pods and deposited back onto the battlefield to take the place of the soldier who's gone down. And so that whole idea of like you being this disposable sort of grunt that has access to this incredible firepower and these incredible gadgets and gizmos and weapons and stuff is kind of like the hook of the game, right? So unlike a lot of games where you're kind of building up a character and trying to kind of level them up and make them more powerful and make them more awesome, Helldivers 2's mantra is your character is a scrub. They're completely disposable. And it's really all about the weapons and the what they call stratagems, which are the things you call in to assist you, be that like advanced weapons or orbital strikes or strafing runs or that sort of thing. And that's actually how you win in the game, is by making use of all that gear and weaponry and such. It's not so much that you do anything all that spectacular as a character. It's more about like how you as the player take advantage of all of those assets and work with your teammates to succeed, despite the fact that your character that you're playing as really isn't anything special.
Now, do you have to work up to get access to some of these weapons? Is that how it
Yes, there
works?
is a unlock progression system. So like as you do missions, you unlock harder difficulties and various types of currency, like sort of in-game currency and XP and all that sort of thing that allow you to basically do upgrades to your Star Destroyer. You basically have like a space faring destroyer that is your kind of launch platform that you uh, dive down onto these worlds from in these hell pods. And that's where all of your orbital strikes come from, or where all of the aircraft that you get deployed to do the strafing runs and stuff all come from this like Star Destroyer thing that you have. And that's also where you kind of gather up with your buddies, to go on these missions cooperatively and do all these things. It's sort of like your base of operations. And so as you play the game and obtain all these currencies and XP and such, that's how you actually progress, is by unlocking upgrades to that destroyer and unlocking additional weapons and such that you can bring with you into battle or deploy onto the battlefield from the destroyer.
Are you able to explore the destroyer?
Not so much. It's a pretty simplistic environment, but it does make for a nice little lobby. Like there's some neat little things like this little game you can play where you kind of walk up to this one console and it teaches you the different key combinations for calling in the stratagems. So basically, the way the stratagems work is that you have to hold a key and then punch in a sequence of movements, right? So it might be, for example, when your teammates go down and you need to call in reinforcements, you hold a button and then it's up, down, right, left, up. And then that's how you activate the stratagem to call in reinforcements, right?
Okay.
And so it almost has a little bit of a fighting game feel to it, where it's like you're in the middle of battle, doing battle with these various aliens that you're going up against, but then in the midst of that you might have to pause for a second and input one of these codes and then like throw a beacon or interact with a terminal and do some kind of puzzle game or mini game or something like that in the middle of the battle to actually get something that you need to have happen. And so that's kind of a neat little wrinkle to the game, and it kind of causes you to have to think a little bit more than you typically do in just a straight up action game. And it's surprising just how much that little bit of extra brain power that you need to have to activate the stratagems and think about like where and when to use them actually really enhances the overall gameplay and makes it more than just sort of like a typical run and gun shooter.
Yeah. Now, do you get to ride down? Is it a cool graphic when you're going down that
Yeah.
hell jumper thing? Do you see get
Yeah, so
loaded in and
whenever
you?
you're on your destroyer and you go into the hell pods, there's basically like
Okay.
these little elevators you ride down into, and you get locked into these little drop pods, and then
Yeah.
there's an animation where everybody gets shot out of the tunnels, and
Okay.
then you actually see the pods coming down through the atmosphere of the planet on fire and stuff, and then they have thrusters that fire right before they get to the ground that slow them down enough so you don't get turned into paste when you hit the
Yeah.
ground. And then you
Hmm.
just sort of the pod just sort of blossoms open like a flower and you just kind of come out of it guns blazing. It's pretty
Huh.
it's pretty wicked
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a good backstory? Like, did they explain how the war started with the bugs, or is it
Well,
just
so the
doesn't care?
interesting thing about it is a lot of the story is told through like these cut scenes that play on like a video screen in your destroyer.
Okay.
Um, and like going and talking to the NPCs who are on the ship with you. And the thing that I would say is interesting about it, which is especially interesting if you're familiar with the things that have obviously inspired this game, like Starship Troopers, is the whole idea of like, are you actually the good guy? Right? Like you're sort of presented as being the good guys, right? That you're
Yeah.
defending Super Earth from these alien invaders, but kind of the more you peel things away, the more you start to realize that that might not actually be uh, things might not actually be the way that they have been proposed to you.
Yeah.
Because there's this whole vibe and this whole idea of like propaganda being a very big part of this whole thing and the way it's presented, such that you're kind of sold this idea that like you're going to liberate the galaxy from all these scumbag aliens who are doing all this terrible stuff, but in reality you might actually be the ones doing all of the terrible stuff to the aliens.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a really neat wrinkle to the way that the whole thing works. And that's something that's uh, kind of true to how the first game was as well. It had that same sort of tongue-in-cheek, um, black humor kind of vibe to it, right? Where it's like, it's very unclear, and especially as you get deeper into it and you see more and more of what's going on, whether or not you're actually the good guys. And I think that's a very cool aspect to it.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Graphics
It's
good?
Oh yeah, it's a looker. It's a
Yeah.
good looking game. They actually did a lot of cool stuff with procedurally generated planets. So you have all these different biomes that you go down to. So like each planet has its own kind of distinct look and feel to it, which definitely goes a long way to helping everything feel kind of unique and interesting, right? Because I've been on dozens of different planets in the game, and like no two of them are actually identically alike. Like they might share some characteristics, but you can definitely tell when you're on one planet versus another, which is pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Hmm.
But the other nice thing about it is very well optimized and does run really well. So even if you have an older machine or maybe not the best graphics card or whatever, it's still going to look good and run well, I think, on most hardware from, say, the past 5, 10 years, because they definitely did a good job on the optimizations, which makes sense because this was originally or conceived of by a Sony studio, and so this was a big PlayStation 5 game at the time of recording this. But I,
Okay.
of course, am playing it on PC because, fortunately, these days Sony releases a lot of their stuff sort of day and date on PC at the same time it comes out on their console, which I definitely appreciate.
Is it an exclusive PS5, or is it on Xbox as well?
So it is not currently available on Xbox, but there has been some talk and some rumblings that this might actually be one of the first Sony games, because there's been some talk lately about Xbox games possibly coming to Sony's platforms and Sony's games possibly coming to Xbox. That's kind of been like rumored
Yeah.
from a few different places over the past year or so. Um, I would not be surprised if a game like this would be made available on Xbox at some point, just because it seems like a really strong candidate for it, because it's not a sort of tentpole first party Sony game. It's actually developed by one of their studios that they own. So even though it's Sony branded, it it could very easily show up on other platforms, I think. I don't think there would be a lot of outcry from the hardcore Sony fans if that were to happen, because that just gives them more people to play with since the game supports cross play. And since it is
Okay.
a sort of cooperative focused multiplayer game, like anything they can do to increase the player base is probably a good thing.
Hmm.
But as of right now, PS5 and PC only. But that may well change in the future. So, having said all of that, it's time to go off the clock. You ready to relax and unwind?
I certainly am.
Very nice, very nice. You have any juicy, fun topics you'd like to dive into?
As a matter of fact, I do. Because
Excellent.
I ended up, I don't know what triggered it, but I thought, I feel like watching the original Planet of the Apes.
Mm.
And as you so often mention about, don't want to go down that rabbit hole, guess what? That's exactly what I did. Because as soon as I watched the first one, I was like, well, what happened with the second one? So I have a whole bunch of graphs and figures in front of me here just to keep it all straight.
Yeah.
So I started watching Planet of the Apes. And then I went through the other four of the original. And then that wasn't enough. I watched the three that are out now on the new version of
Mhm.
Planet of the Apes. So I guess we can always start. Well, first of all, I guess are you a Planet of the Apes fan?
Yes, actually, well, way back in episode 2, we actually talked about I think it was like the 25th anniversary, or maybe it was like the 40th anniversary of like Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. It was like a thing
Okay.
we had talked about previously on the show. And funnily enough, right after we recorded that, I kind of got a little Planet of the Apes obsessed and went out and grabbed like the digital versions of all of those movies. I even have the Mark Wahlberg Planet of the Apes reboot from like 2009. So I'm decked out on my Planet of the Apes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't think that. Well, we can talk about that one after because that's a different kettle of fish. See
Uh-huh.
what we thought about that. But so yeah, the Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston was pretty good. I could not for the life of me remember the beginning. So that was
Hmm.
actually one of the main reasons I wanted to. I was like, how did they get there? What did they do? And then you see them in the spaceship, and it's fun. Now that talking about like dated and
Yeah.
stuff, the
Yeah.
dialogue and stuff, it was like at the beginning. I was just like, oh, cheeso fest. But it was
Yeah.
a cool idea. They're in the ship, and then they go into that their sleep mode because they have a ways to go, and then they crash in the water and find
Hmm.
themselves on the Planet of the Apes, where we meet Cornelius and Zira, and Charlton's got to basically run for his life.
Hmm.
So I thought it was clever. I had the
Yeah,
whole
I think
idea.
that movie holds up for sure.
Yeah. And I mean,
Yeah.
the ending, if nothing else, is
Hmm.
so iconic.
Hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure everyone's seen it by now,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
but
even before that, the like some of the intellectual discussions that they get into, and like some of the whole, the way that whole idea of like him being viewed as a savage by them,
yeah,
right? Because he can't speak, right? Because of the problem with his throat and all that. Uh, that's just such a great way that whole thing plays out, and
yeah,
when they have to eventually acknowledge his intelligence and how that actually ends up playing out, I think is one other really cool aspect of that movie that often gets overlooked.
yeah. And the concept too of like how there are sort of elders among the apes that
Hmm.
actually know more
Right. They know
about
what's up.
what's
Right. Yeah.
actually happened.
Yeah. They're
They don't
just
know
trying to suppress
everything,
it. Yeah.
but they do know that humans What gets back to your video game, the propaganda is like,
Mm-hmm.
but ends up humans are bad, we're
Mm-hmm.
we're our own worst enemy. But yeah, it's such a neat concept.
Yeah. Well,
And
and the other funny thing about it is, as they get into the other movies in those original four, they really end up going to some wild, off the wall places, but it all ends up making a lot of sense in the
yeah,
context of the thing as a whole.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because the next one is beneath the Planet of the Apes, where they have that sort of post-nuclear war humans with the strange faces, and the whole idea of sort of the bomb being something that they revere like their god that they
Mm-hmm.
pray to was the interesting concept,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the sort of the telepathy kind of thing that we garnered. But that was interesting because then we have, so I think it was James Francisco. I remember, but I remember when they said the name on, I was like, oh my God, I haven't heard that name since like the 70s kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because I guess he was really big back then. I cannot
Yeah.
for the life of me remember what he was in, but he was a well-known name then.
Mm-hmm.
So, he goes looking for Taylor to see what's what and finds him. But uh, that was interesting. And then you see where the apes are starting to split among themselves as well. So they're not much different than humans.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, then we move on to Escape from the Planet of the Apes, where there's more time travel, but this time it's the apes going back in time instead of going to the future like Taylor, played by Charlton Heston, did.
Mm-hmm.
Cornelia and Zira go back in time, and it's almost like the opposite of the first one, where the
Mm-hmm.
humans think they're just dumb apes,
Right.
but
Right.
then they find out they can speak, and it's like the reverse, which
Yeah.
was kind of interesting because it was kind of looking at the same thing but from a different viewpoint.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah. And they had, and then they had, oh my God, uh, I can't think of his name now. The guy who plays, I think it's Armand, is the character. He was on Fantasy Island. Montalban,
Yes, Ricardo
Ricardo
Montalban.
Montalban. That's it.
Yes.
He plays Armando, and he's a sympathetic person to their, cause. And I don't know. Should we like have a spoiler alert, or
Well, I
should
was
we
going to
just
say
skip over
we've
it?
sort of established that in Off the Clock, we're allowed to go into spoiler territory, right? That's sort of
Yeah,
the thing that we've said, right?
there you go.
Um, so
So,
yeah,
and I'm
if
sure,
anybody doesn't want Planet of the Apes spoilers, maybe skip ahead to the next section. Yeah.
uh, so because with the old switcheroo that happens, and then Armand has little baby Caesar.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then, which leads, of course, then to uh,
Conquest.
that's Conquest of the Planet of the Apes,
Yeah. That's one of
and
my favorites for sure.
that's where well, that's where the pandemic happens, and humans are kind of dead because it was pets, wasn't it? It was all dogs and cats died. Some weird pandemic happened, and so they were using apes as pets. And then I guess they realized they could actually do more than pets. They could actually be like servants. And unfortunately for them, Caesar comes from the future, or was born from people from the future, and he can communicate, and he turns the tables and leads a revolution.
Yeah. That speech, I think I've mentioned this on the show previously, but I'll repeat myself. That speech that he gives, where he's like rallying the troops in that
Yeah.
movie, is definitely like one of my favorite little like monologue things from those movies. It's really good.
And
He's
then
talking about like the downfall of humanity and all that sort of thing.
yeah, yeah, and then after that, you think, wow, the apes have sort of broken free and are their own people. But then comes battle for the Planet of the Apes, where they find this outcrop of humans that I don't know why the humans are so stupid in these series though. They're always living in the worst like crap holes. It's
Yeah.
like they're never. I was like, why don't some of them like live in a ranch in like Montana and just kind of like wall it off? Why live in like these decrepit sewers and underground caves?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
maybe they're hiding from like nuclear fallout or
Well,
something.
that's what was kind of the assumption that I always made, was that like all of the primo areas had gotten nuked, right? So like
Yeah,
they were just living wherever they could, right?
yeah,
In like hole in the wall, like off the beaten path places that had not been exposed to radiation, was
yeah,
kind of the way I guessed that worked out.
yeah. But the apes seem to have no problem living in outdoors in the fields.
Hmm.
But I
Yeah.
digress.
Yeah.
So they bump into this thing, and of course, humans being humans just can't come up and go, "Hey, so you're survivors too. Why don't we work together to better our lot?" No, they decide we're going to war.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hence the battle for the Planet of the Apes. I
Yeah.
mean, in that, I mean, the action's okay, but I mean, that's certainly dated.
Yeah,
It's
for sure. Yeah.
you know,
Well, like I say, I feel like the original series, the original several films kind of peaked with Conquest for me. And I
yeah.
feel like it never really hit that height again. Uh,
So
but
yeah,
there was just that one after it, so it's not like that was bad, you know.
yeah, no, it was all right, and the the characters were good. I mean,
Yeah.
they were played well and stuff, and the whole movie arc, or I did not even a movie, the series arc, I thought was good.
Hmm.
It kind of explained everything, and it was a cool concept.
Well, and I do really like how the modern ones don't try to erase the old ones, right? Because you
Yeah,
could kind of view the modern ones as even a prequel to the original ones.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they had all the points.
Hmm.
They just kind of gave it a modern touch and sort of ran with it because
Hmm.
the whole thing there was it was like a drug that was supposed to help Alzheimer's.
Hmm. Yeah.
And the first one, which was what is it, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Um, John Lithgow, who plays the father,
Yeah, he was
is
great in
really
that.
good.
Yeah.
And uh, you know, the drugs, failing and stuff. It's kind of like, in a way, like I Am Legend, kind of a
Hmm.
sort of a nod to that. They came up with something they thought was going to be really good for a good thing, for a good cause, but unfortunately, there's always the evil corporate person that you know won't allow proper testing to happen. They rush it out too quick,
Yeah.
and there were side effects.
Mistakes were made.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they it was interesting, because they have the one ape, Caesar, who was only brought home because it was a baby and they didn't want to euthanize it. And his father liked it because his father was going through later stages of Alzheimer's. So you know, it was like, oh well, they can keep each other company kind of thing. But then it flips forward a bunch of years, and you know, Caesar's gotten bigger, stronger, and still very much a tight family unit. But then you see sort of the sad sort of side of like dementia and Alzheimer's and stuff.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's portrayed really well.
yeah,
Yeah.
and and then the scene where, and I think it was really well done, you know, how um, they lose Caesar, the ape, you know,
Hmm.
and it was for a noble thing because someone was, you know, picking on the father who was completely confused, didn't know what was going on,
Yep.
and Caesar went out. But
Yep.
unfortunately, Caesar's extremely strong, and anyways, and that neighbor he
Hmm.
gets what's coming to him anyway. So,
Yeah.
spoiler.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so yeah, so unfortunately, you know, police are involved and Caesar's taken away, and he's met with a whole cast of characters. So it's a different kind of how they sort of, well, it's sort of in a way because both Caesars were thrown into like a sort of a penitentiary for apes kind of thing where
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That aspect I feel like was pretty consistent between the two. I
yeah,
liked that they managed to make that similar but not exactly the same.
yeah. And
Yeah.
you know, he learns the tricks how to, you know, get stuff done, and he slowly, you know,
How to
gets the apes on
establish
his
himself
side.
in the pecking order with all the other
Exactly.
apes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that it was it just really it really blended the old ones in, and it was nicely modernized too.
Yeah.
And then of course when that all happens, it leads to uh Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, where they bring in like the pandemic again. Uh and this time it was the pandemic, I guess, killed, oh, it was humans, the simian flu, where in the original it killed uh, the dogs and cats. This
Hmm.
one uh, killed well, it didn't kill us actually. It prevented you from talking, and you some people I guess became, I don't know, they were like mutes. I don't think it impaired their mind though,
Hmm.
but anyways, it was a flu, a pandemic that affected humans, and uh what oh, that they there's the holdouts in San Francisco. Now I'm getting confused.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't help you with this one because I have
Right.
actually only seen Rise. I have not seen the other two of the new
Oh,
ones
really?
yet.
Oh, I
Yeah.
guess no spoilers then for me.
Yeah.
So they but there is a pandemic, and there's survivors in San Francisco.
Hmm.
And of course, well, actually, I don't know. How much do you want to know?
I mean, you might as well give it to me because I'm sure I'll watch it eventually, but I'm not, it's not on like my immediate to watch
Rush to
list.
watch. Well, I won't
Yeah.
say too much,
I'll,
but
I'll
there was
probably
like
forget by the time I actually watch it.
uh there. Well, now that you're 50,
Yeah, anything could
it all
happen.
starts going.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it's where it was the humans that kind of did stupid things and made mistakes. In this one, it's actually the apes that cause all the problems.
Yeah, I'd kind of gotten that impression from the trailer
Yeah,
that I saw, so that made that all tracks. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Caesar's still like an honorable one, and there's all the many of the majority of the apes are good, but there are some bad seeds and
Yeah.
it's them that actually cause. So it's not humans this time that just go, we hate them. Like in the original, we're just going to wipe out as many apes as we can. This time, it's the apes do something stupid and force the human's hand to go into battle. But still, there's humans that try to help the apes. But unfortunately, there's not much they can do because it all comes to a head. And so, battle they do. And that leads to the last. Well, no, not the last, because there's going to be another one coming out in May.
Yeah, the
But
last that's currently available.
yeah,
Yes.
is War for the Planet of the Apes, where the
Mhm.
last one ends, where there was the battle between the two. The humans managed to get a call out to this northern army, and they're on its way.
Mhm.
So we come to War of the Planet of the Apes, and well, it's just like a lot of fighting and
Yeah.
stuff. And Woody Harrelson's really good in
Yeah,
it.
he plays like kind of the leader of that human army faction,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah. He kind of like tried to be like Kurtz from Apocalypse Now, you know,
Okay.
the bald leader who's, philosophical and thinking about, why it is he's doing what he's doing, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And that's a lot of cool scenes. I feel like sort of warlike fighting scenes in that one. And but can't say too much without spoiling a lot. But
Yeah.
it'll all lead up to the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which comes out this May.
Oh
So
wow,
just a
that's close.
mere months away.
Well, by the time everybody sees this, it will
It might be
be
out.
it will be coming out because this will be coming out in May. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So I don't know if it's late May, early May. They said May 2024. So we'll see.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys might have not have realized it, but there was actually a purpose behind all this Planet of the Apes talk. We were psyching you up for the new one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this coming May, which is now,
Yes.
go see
Well, that
Planet of
just
the
means you don't have
Apes.
to wait very long.
Exactly. Not like us. In
Yeah.
real
See, we're
time, we
we're all
got away.
salty because we got to wait a couple of months. But see,
Yeah.
you, through the magic of podcasting time travel, are
Uh,
going to get to go see it right away.
yeah. But Planet of the Apes, I don't know. It was fun. It's just kind of I like high concept stuff
Hmm.
because I like to see someone who really comes up with something original and stuff, and that's a hard one to beat.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of good things going for those movies for sure. There's
But
a lot of stuff in there that's worth exploring
yeah, I
in pretty
have the
much all of
book
them.
that it was all based on.
Nice.
I think it was written by a French author, if I remember correctly. But I've yet to read it. But I have it,
Yeah.
and I'd be curious. I should see how different the book is from. 'Cause I don't know who's ever written any sequels or anything. I think it was just a one-off book.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah, I would
should sit down and
imagine
read
the
it.
movies have gone far beyond the scope of the book by this point, but
I
I
would
really couldn't
imagine.
say because I haven't read it.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Planet of the Apes. Nothing
Nice.
like it.
You got a wistful, nostalgic look in your eye. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I had planned to only watch the one, and then I don't know, it just led on and
Yeah,
on and on to next one, next one, next one, next
they're
one.
like potato chips,
Yeah. Yeah. Which is a
but
good thing,
fuzzier.
obviously, because if I was like, yeah, this was kind of lame,
Yeah.
there's nothing else. But each one I watched and I was looking forward to the next one. And even when I finished the series, I said, you know what? I'm going to rewatch the new versions too.
Hmm.
And then, of course, there's what you brought up, the Donnie Wahlberg one.
Yeah, yeah. That's. I mean,
I didn't,
I
I
didn't
didn't hate
dislike
it
that movie. I just
as
felt like it
much
didn't
as
bring anything new to the table.
no.
Yeah.
And the ending, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah, it's just sort of meh. If
Yeah,
I had to
because it's like,
pick
well,
a word.
you're already on a planet with the apes, but
Mhm.
you're
But I
going,
mean, I get the whole implication that it's like he was trying to get back to his version of reality, right?
yeah,
And you know, their tinkering prevented that. That is kind of an interesting wrinkle,
yeah,
but also not surprising given like the whole rest of the movie, right? Like that whole thing was like totally telegraphed, right? Like
yeah,
you kind of knew that was what was going to happen because it was kind of what had to happen to make the ending make any sense,
yeah.
right?
It was,
So yeah, I
yeah,
don't know. It,
and
it
you knew
was
it had to have the big ending because I think the whole movie was based on we want to have a cool ending like the original first movie.
exactly,
I think that was
exactly.
their whole idea, and then they
Yes,
just worked the rest of it around it.
yes. I feel like that's absolutely what happened with that one. Is that they wrote the ending and then they're like, okay, how do we get there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
uh, but as I said, it wasn't bad. I mean, but if you've seen all the other ones and stuff, you're kind of like,
Well, we
okay,
had talked about that Cube remake last episode or the episode before, and
yeah,
I feel like it's a similar situation, right? Where it's like if you've seen all the other ones and you just need some more Planet of the Apes in your life, maybe go watch that one, but definitely don't watch that one first.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I tried to find the new Cube one, the Japanese version. I cannot find it anywhere.
Oh,
It's
really?
they
That's
don't apparently they don't have the rights in Canada or something because
oh,
I went
interesting.
to like Prime, I went everywhere. I tried Tubi even, and I could
Huh.
not find it. It'll eventually probably come, but it
Yeah, I'm
wasn't.
sure eventually that'll show up.
But
I'm
yeah, because I
sure.
was like, after we talked about it, I was like, I'm gonna watch that. I'm curious now, and I
Mhm.
could not find it. And
Yeah.
considering how many streaming services I have, it was kind of
That's really
annoying.
disappointing. You'd think at least one of those, that
Yeah,
plethora of streaming services in your arsenal would have it, but
yeah. Oh, but a movie that just popped up is Corner Office.
oh, nice,
Yeah,
nice.
I saw that one on. Hey, I think that's the one Michael was talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I think you might enjoy that.
Yeah, I put it on my to be watched list or whatever you
Yeah,
when you
your
save
cube.
it or whatever.
Yeah,
So yeah, so I
yeah,
could always
nice.
go, oh, I like that one, but I'll forget that I even saw it. So I make sure you go to my list and it's just row after row after
Yeah, I
row of
bet.
movies.
I bet there's no shortage of options on that list.
No, and I have so many. But yet, when I want to watch it, I'm like, I scroll and go, yeah, no, 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 no. I'm like,
Uh,
but anyways,
First world
mm,
problems.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Ah, it's always nice
Well,
to lounge around.
yeah, nice. Well, get comfortable because I've got something that I was going to talk about
Uh-huh.
before we get out of here, which is something I've been doing lately, which is kind of a little bit nostalgic, a little bit going down memory lane. And it's something we've actually never really talked about on the show before. So I thought people might find that interesting, which is I've been going back and watching some old anime series that I had been into back in the day. And there's one in particular that I've actually watched several times over the years that I really kind of get a kick out of every time I revisit it, which is a show called Initial D. And for those who are not familiar with this show and its premise, it's basically about street racers living in Japan in the 1990s. And so it's these kids basically who go around driving like the mountain passes around like the prefectures of Japan in their like souped up, Japanese sports cars, in the middle of the night, kind of challenging each other to duels and whatnot. So it's kind of like samurais with cars,
Yeah,
in a weird sort of way. But it's where a lot of like the sort of Japanese street racing, drifting, JDM kind of car modding culture kind of is very much deeply tied into that because of course like most anime series, Initial D started out as a long-running series of manga comics, and before it, kind of became a show and movies and all that sort of thing. And so it has this very like long, rich, and storied history. But I actually really enjoy watching the first 4 seasons of that, which got dubbed into English at one point by a company here in the US called Funimation. Sadly, they actually never did dub the last 2 seasons of the series into English because I guess there just wasn't enough demand for it. So I ended up having to watch the last 2 seasons in Japanese with subtitles, which is not a
Okay.
problem, except for the fact that, it's a little hard to pay attention to all the action on the screen while you're busy reading the subtitles. But yeah, I really enjoy that show. I think it's really fun and kind of interesting and cool, mostly because it's one of the very few animes that I've watched that I can say is pretty grounded and realistic because it is kind of based in the real world and based around like real world activities. Whereas like a lot of animes are kind of over the top and fantastical and like crazy in terms of their premises and stuff like that. uh, I think that the like relatability of something like Initial D is kind of unique and rare in the anime sort of subculture.
Hmm. That's it. Did you have like buy the DVDs, or did this actually
Yeah, I've
stream
had the
somewhere?
DVDs for a while, but you can actually stream the first couple of seasons of it on Hulu, and that's actually what I ended up doing because I didn't feel like digging out the DVDs. So I was just like, oh, let's just fire this up and hit
Yeah.
play. And so that was cool, just kind of revisiting it. And then, of course, I got hooked and ended up watching a bunch more of it than I had originally intended to because it's kind of like your Planet of the Apes thing, right? It's like potato chips, right? You just start
Yeah.
watching, you're like, oh, what's the next episode? Because it's all sequential, right? It's like an
Okay.
ongoing story that's spread out over like these dozens and dozens of episodes over all these seasons. And so you get this, nice progression story that kind of unfolds throughout it, which is fun. So it's not like individual one-off self-contained episodes, right? It's like a story arc that you're following throughout the whole thing.
They have like cliffhangers at end of each episode kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Make it okay.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily cliffhangers, but definitely like they leave you in a place where you're like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen next, or they'll set
Yeah.
something up that, where they leave you wondering like, okay, what's the next, facet to this that they're going to explore? Because obviously there's all this stuff that's happening on the street, with all of the racing and the car stuff and all that, which is intriguing in its own right. But then they also have all these little side stories with all these characters and all their sort of interpersonal drama and like romantic entanglements and all this other stuff, which in some ways is just as interesting as, the car stuff.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously a little cheesy, a little like anime.
Yeah.
Just if you're familiar with anime, there's sort of like tropes and sort of standards of the genre, the things you kind of come to expect from it are still like very present in this. So it's not like it transcends the genre or anything like that. But if you're cool with that, right? If you're cool with the anime style of doing things and that kind of method of storytelling, I think that show does it really well. Um, but I figured I'd throw out a couple other series that I've watched and enjoyed over the years too, in case like maybe somebody's not particularly interested in the whole like 90s street racing premise. Some other ones that I would highly recommend are things like Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, which is a great like near future kind of sci-fi cyberpunky kind of premise. Um, Ninja Scroll, which takes place in feudal Japan during like the Tokugawa dynasty, I believe. Uh, and the other one I just watched recently, like within the past couple of years for the first time, is one called Assassination Classroom, which is about a school for assassins where their teacher is basically like an alien that's trying to teach them how to become assassins. So lots of interesting like topics and subgenres and settings and all sorts of things to explore in the world of anime. But those are some of my personal favorites that I've been entertained by over the years.
Well, I guess the one thing with anime too is it's like literally you could do anything as a creative that your mind wants. There's no
Right, because you
limitations with
don't have
that.
to necessarily worry about replicating that in reality, right? Anything you can
Exactly.
draw, you can have happen. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
So it can be sort of somewhat wild. There's a few I've seen, and I can't think of what they are. I might have seen because there's a couple of Ghost in the Machines, aren't there?
Yeah, so Ghost in the Shell was actually very popular at one point because they had brought the original film over to the US, and it was like one of the first anime films to get shown in like US theaters
Yeah.
back in the 90s. It was kind of a big deal at the time. Like
Yeah.
there weren't a lot of animes that like made the transition across the pond, so to speak. But that one
So
actually did. I actually saw that original Ghost in the Shell movie in the theater in the US here, and
I
that
think
kind of
I've
got
seen
my
that one.
my interest peaked in that. But what Standalone Complex is it's sort of like a parallel story that's sort of adjacent to the movies. So you don't really have to have seen the movies to get it, or vice versa. It kind of it's self-contained, as the
Yeah.
name implies. But that's a really cool premise. It gets into a lot of cool, like philosophical, like metaphysical, sort of transhumanism type stuff, where it's like all these people with all these cybernetic implants and augments and enhancements to their bodies, and like at what point do you cease to be human if you've got like you know robotic and endoskeleton and bulletproof skin and all of this
Yeah.
other stuff, right? And like that's like a big sort of recurring theme in that one is the whole like what is it exactly that makes you human?
Hmm. I think there was another one that I saw. I I think it was called like Akira.
Oh, Akira, yeah, that's a classic from 1986.
Yeah.
Another classic anime film.
Those are only two that come to mind when I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, Akira never, as far as I know anyway, never actually had a series, unlike these other things that I'm mentioning. But that
yeah.
is a great film, like really really cool.
Hmm. Oh well.
Yeah, but I like to break out some of those more obscure things, maybe stuff that we don't talk about too frequently. Maybe throw some stuff out there, give some people some ideas about things to check out that are a little off the beaten path. I know a lot of people are into anime, and probably a lot of people who watch the show are already into that sort of thing. But like I said, given that we've never really talked about it before, I thought it'd be fun to throw some out there. So you ready to wrap this thing up?
I certainly am.
Excellent. I feel like we've done some good work here today.
Talked about lots of stuff that you should be reading and watching. But we appreciate
Indeed.
you dropping by.
Congratulations, you just survived the post-mortem report. For more information about the show, the hosts, or the things they talked about, visit our official website at postmortemreport.com. And always remember, good posts never die.
All righty. Let's call it a day. I know you're waiting for me to hit the button.
I can see it's recording.
Yeah, yeah. Good time.